So these are the answers for solving quadratics using a square root. For the formative assessment, number one mistake is you forgot both the positive and the negative answer. So remember, you were taking the square root on both sides. Many of you had 2, but you've been able to do that for a long time. This is showing that you understand that there is a positive and a negative square root when you're solving a quadratic equation. Here, many of you had this. Rounding was an issue, but many of you didn't have this. It's minus 11, so you had to add 11. There was a coefficient of 1/5, so you had to multiply by 5 to have x squared equals 120, and then you needed to take the square root of that. And again, the answer, both the positive and the negative, 10.95 if you're rounding to 2 decimal places. So biggest mistakes, not multiplying by the reciprocal and forgetting both the positive and the negative answer. Most of you got question 3 right. All you needed to do was take this formula and plug in the values. But again, some of you did not remember, if you have a fraction as a coefficient, to multiply by the reciprocal to get rid of it and then take the square root. Some of you forgot labels as well. It's 36 miles per hour. And the level 4 question I thought was pretty easy because you did these on your assignment. You have to isolate that quadratic part before taking the square root. So it was plus 5, so we had to subtract 5. It was multiplied by 4, so you had to divide by 4. But right here, remember, there are 2 answers. Once you take the square root, there's the positive 5 and the negative 5. So you should have had 2 separate equations and solve for x on both. So again, practice finding all square roots. Positive numbers have 2 square roots. Negative, none, 0, 1. This is for solving problems using Pythagorean theorem. There are many of you did awesome on this, but for those of you that didn't, here we go. So the first one is the converse, and all you really had to do was show me the work that you were plugging the numbers in, so you knew which was A, which was B, which was C, and I put them in order. So this is a pretty easy one. It shows that it works, so this one was a yes. For this question 6, you needed to find what x was. And some of you thought that it went with the directions for number 5, but this was what you were trying to find, x. You were given the hypotenuse and a leg, so it was a subtraction problem. C squared minus A squared equals B squared. Some of you forgot that if you take the square root and square it, it makes those disappear. So we did 196 minus 27 to get 169. We took the square root of each. It's only the positive one now because we're talking a distance. So many of you had that right. Quite a few of you forgot the label though. All right, Maggie's dollhouse. I drew in the height for you so you knew which part I was talking about. So here, this bottom part was 24. Most of you figured out that it's only half of that, so 12. What many of you did, though, was you added. Again, the hypotenuse and a leg was given to you. You were finding a leg, so you needed to subtract. And actually, more of you got the 4 level right than the 2 and 3 level correct. Because you were adding for these, and you could add for these. It was not correct, though, if I didn't see both of the correct answers. Don't forget to show your work. I have quite a few of you that are not showing nice steps and thought process. So the trick here is x was the square root of 328, which is approximately 18.1, but we could leave it in radical form and put it in here. I am telling you right now that this is a proficient on your summative assessment, and I don't have these drawn in for you. So make sure you understand that you needed to find you needed to find x by taking these legs and finding x, and then to find y, you take this leg, and what you have is x as your other leg. This video is for those of you that did not do well on the learning target. I can determine sine, cosine, tangent values for an angle of a right triangle. So where that triangle went to, I don't know. So this first one, I even told you the level 1 was going to be this. It was straight out of notes. You needed to tell me the trigonomic ratios using adjacent, hypotenuse, and opposite. I wanted the full words because the more you write them, the more you're going to be able to remember them. Many of you just said O over H and A over H. I wanted the full words. Some of you just said so and then ka and then toa. That is not what I was looking for at all. That was completely wrong. I wanted to see the ratios. There you have it. Here, some of you, only a couple did not give me the ratios. You did very, very well on this. So you could have left it in fraction form. I accepted the decimal as well. What I did not accept is if you put the angle measure here, because the directions clearly say to find the ratios. All right, question 11. Find the measure of angle J to the nearest degree. So here is J. You are given these two sides, so I labeled opposite and adjacent, and the ratio that deals with opposite and adjacent sides is the tangent. So you needed to find the tangent of angle J. You set up the ratio, do that division, and find it on the table, and it was 24 degrees. Most of you got this correct. What I was seeing, though, is some of you did not tell me your thought process. I need to see what ratio you're using. Are you using tan? Are you using sine? Are you using cosine? Which one are you using? So I need to see this work. So finding the missing side length E, it is right here. So I found the angle that I was talking about, 61, and I labeled my sides. And this was also tangent because it dealt with opposite and adjacent. So this work is what I need to see. So the tangent of 61 is, and I put 49 over E. And then I looked at the table to get the decimal. And then the last step is solving the equation in which you have to divide to solve for E. So E was 27.2. So one more time, you find the angle that you're talking about, you see what sides you're referring to, you choose if sine, cosine, or tangent, you find the degrees and the decimal that goes along with it on the table, and then solve the equation. And the level 4 question wasn't difficult if you remembered that the sum of 3 angles in a triangle is 180 degrees. So to be able to find, oh, it was B. To be able to find B down here, you needed to have a side length and an angle. So you needed to find X first. So I did that by taking my 90-degree angle plus my X plus my 4X plus 5 and put it equal to 180, and then I solve for X. So now I know that this angle has a measurement of 17 degrees. So then I looked at what two sides I was talking about, and again, it was opposite over adjacent, so it was tan. So the tangent of 17 degrees was 0.3057, and it met the ratio 10, so opposite over adjacent, 10 over B. So I then solved this by dividing by 0.3057 on both sides. 0.3057 to get 32.7 meters. You needed to have this one correct to get A, and this again is a new learning target about the applications of trig functions, and you needed this one to get a 1 or to get a 2. So here is the angle that we're talking about. We wanted to know the height, how far up the parasolilar was. So I labeled my sides. We were talking about the opposite and the hypotenuse, which is sine. A couple of you had cosine, some of you had tangent, but it's sine, opposite over hypotenuse. We're given that angle measure. So you put the angle measure in, so sine of 25, and then you set up your ratio. This was my unknown side, so and this was the given. So opposite over hypotenuse, x over 800. I would not use O. Some of you did in there for opposite, and I get that, and I didn't count it wrong, but it looks like a 0, so it's a little confusing. So use a different variable other than O. So I found on the table the sine of 25. So you find angle 25, the degrees, go down the sine column. There was this, equals x over 100, and then you needed to multiply by 800 on both sides to get your 338.1 feet. All right, for this problem you needed to draw the picture. So a 10-meter ladder, so here's your 10 meters, and it was exactly like one we did in notes, so most of you got this one correct. 10-meter ladder rests against a vertical wall, so there's my vertical wall. Between the foot and the ladder is 2 feet. So here's my 10, here's my 2 feet, and we're trying to find not this, not the height, but the angle the ladder makes with, and this is important, the wall. There are some of you that did set it perfectly, but you were trying to find the angle where it met the ground instead of the wall. So here's where it meets the wall. I labeled my sides, so opposite and hypotenuse. The one that deals with opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So I was looking for the degrees for sine that goes with the ratio 2 over 10. So I did that division, I looked on the chart, and it came up to 12 degrees. So again, you look down the sine column until you reach your point 2, and it was 12 degrees. And I don't think, even though this was a 4 level, I don't think it was any more difficult than the one before. Forest Ranger estimates the height is about 175. He's standing 100 feet from the base. What is the angle of measure formed by the ranger's line of sight? So he's here between the ground and the top of the tree. So right here. Again, I need to see these equations. Some of you had the degrees right for both of these, but I'm not seeing your work. I need to see this. So again, you need to label your sides. It was the opposite over adjacent, so tan. So I was looking for the tan of x. I set up my ratio. I did the division. I found it in the tan column, and it was 60 degrees, or I put 60.3 because I was using a calculator, but 60 degrees.